My name is Patrick Austin, and we're talking to interesting people who are doing innovative things in the state of Rhode Island. I'm happy to welcome Ted Nesi from WPRI.com and Eyewitness News, WPRI TV, Channel 12, political reporter and blogger. Did I get that correct?
You did. Thanks for having me, Patrick.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. So I think you're a really interesting person just for the fact that you created this position of political blogger for WPRI.com, Channel 12. You're the first person I know who made this position locally in Rhode Island. I know it was a national trend where things started moving towards digital-focused news and political reporting and blogging, but it really didn't hit Rhode Island until you started. So I'm curious to know, where did you get the idea to do this, and how did you do it?
Well, like you say, Patrick, it wasn't rocket science by any means. A lot of people were doing things like this all over the country, and I saw an opening in Rhode Island. It was back in 2010. I was working for the Providence Business News as a staff writer, and there was a lot of hubbub about newspapers and TV stations and other places building out more web-first content. People writing blogs, people sort of using interactive tools and things to do the same standards of news reporting, but find different ways to present it. And so I thought there was definitely room for that in Rhode Island. We're a small media market. It seemed like a place where there could really be a lot of enthusiasm for that and a sort of an untapped market for people to try that. So I ended up writing a letter to Jay Howell, the former general manager at Channel 12. Not a letter. I ended up writing an email to the head of Channel 12 at the time, Jay Howell, who's now our vice president of television at our parent company, Lynn Media, here in Providence. And I just pitched the idea to him. I said, blogs are big all over the country. Rhode Island doesn't really have a lot of digital-first news right now that is really focused on that. I'm young. I'm cheap to hire. And I think we could try it. I think it could add something, I hope, if I do it well, for Channel 12, original content for you. You could also turn things into TV stories if they pan out like that. And kind of going for the sort of insight. I try to write for everyone. I hope people from all over, read the stories and the analysis stuff that I do. But there are just certain people who are really engaged with politics, with media, with the economy, who want to really dig in on why unemployment is high, what's going on with the population, what's going on behind the scenes at the State House. And that is a big part of where we thought there would be an audience for this, is people like that who really wanted the backstory, whether it's the backstory about data or the backstory about what's going on in politics. And Jay Howell, to his credit, said immediately, I think this is a great idea, let's do it, and just created this job and said, try it out and see what you think. And it's gone very well. I've been very blessed and grateful for the opportunity they gave me at Channel 12, and I love my job. I have a lot of freedom, which I value highly. As someone, I'm 29, to have that at my age is huge. And we now have a second digital reporter, Dan McGowan, who's joined me, who is very similar. He does sort of original reporting for the website. But yeah, it just was sort of on a lark based on seeing what was happening in other markets and nationally. And Channel 12 was the one that said, yeah, let's try it.
Well, it's funny because you make it sound so easy. And it really is. The initial idea and concept of it does sound easy. And I think a lot of people have great ideas and they have all of these things they want to do. But I think you're the point of, it's just about going out and doing it. Just pitching it.
To some extent, right? I think I knew Jay a little from PBN. I'd interviewed him before, so I certainly had a sense that I was pitching to someone who was very into innovative ways of using both the legacy TV station and also the web. He was a news junkie, and so I knew I was approaching someone who, at least, if anyone was going to like the idea, it was him. So a big part of it was them being receptive on the other end. You can pitch things all day, but if no one's interested in hiring you, it's not going to happen. But one thing that a lot of people asked me at the time when I was thinking about trying this was, why don't you just start your own website or something like that? And I've actually never been very big on that idea, because for me, what I love to do and what I'm good at is reporting. And if you start your own site and it's a for-profit business, you're a business person, you're a publisher or a station manager. You need to sell ads, you need to be worried about audience growth, you need to be worried, everything is your problem. And I know where my skills are and where they aren't. And building a business, maybe I could do it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I didn't see how I'd have time to do the content to bring people there and run the business, which is why I was so glad to be able to try this inside a larger organization that could sort of have sort of a mini startup mentality in a little piece of the enterprise.
Exactly. I mean, that's really interesting. Just the fact of you had this idea, you were able to bring it to fruition, and now really you've excelled. I mean, 5,000 followers on Twitter, that must be a number you stare at every single day, watching it bump up person by person. But I mean, that's really a large following for such a small market that we're in. And like you said, it's a political niche that you are filling. And so what's your day-to-day look like? You walk into the office at what time? What are you doing every day?
So my day-to-day changes a lot. It depends on the news cycle in a lot of ways. So if there's a lot going on at the State House, especially toward the end of the legislative session, I might be just going there for most of the day. Other times I'm meeting up with folks. I'm trying to get so much of reporting, especially a job like mine where you're supposed to come up with your own stuff. I'm not being really assigned. Is just research and learning and listening and being curious and just constantly looking for ideas and information. And a lot of that is reading. A lot of that is running around and meeting up with different people and being on the phone. And I think some days, you go in early and you are taping a TV show like I do Newsmakers with Tim White. We tape that on Fridays, and I tape Executive Suite, our business show, on Thursday afternoons. So I have TV-oriented days where I'm researching for the shows or, writing my tracks and everything. But a lot of days I'll go in at, between 9 and 10, I try to get in. And, usually I start with a lot of reading and catching up on Twitter and catching up with what's going on out there and what happened overnight and my email and what information has come in. And then usually I have something I need to write early on, whether it's something for TV later in the week or a story that's popped up or just an idea I had or something like that. Try to get that out early because I find as the day goes on, things start to come up and your time is no longer your own. That's one thing I'm trying to get better at is I find the later it gets in the week and the later it gets in the day, the less control I seem to have over my own time. It's about other people make news and I have to go along with it, or there is something they need me to help with for the television side of things. So Monday mornings are my most productive time of the week sometimes, I think, because there's very little distraction because all the people who make news haven't started making it yet because they're still having the meetings about what news to make.
Yep, exactly. That makes perfect sense. I think it's about living it too. We're not in a 9-to-5 society really anymore. It's just about what are you interested in, what can you do, and how can you bring value to Channel 12 and to the visitors of WPRI.com. What have some of your big successes been? What are those big stories that you've covered that you really look back on and say, that was it, that was great?
Well, one of the things that I think is why my job has worked for Channel 12 and for me has been they give me time to learn something before it's big. It drives a lot of traffic. If you think about what's the talk of the town right now in digital media is BuzzFeed. And BuzzFeed now is hiring reporters and doing long-form work. But when we think of BuzzFeed, you think of the 9 cat pictures you have to see today or the 12 facts about the 90s that'll blow your mind. In all fairness,
those cat pics are hilarious.
They're amazing. We clearly both look at them, right? So and that's the thing. There's a huge audience for that, and it drives a lot of traffic. If you did the 6 pension charts you've got to see today, might not do as well as the cat photos. But Channel 12 has consistently sort of given me leeway to learn about a topic when it's bubbling under, and that's become really important when it becomes a big story. So the 2 examples I think of are 38 Studios, the Curt Schilling deal, where I spent a lot of time reporting on it back in 2010, back when the deal was being done and Governor Kacheri and the state legislative leaders were working on it. I did stories. I interviewed video game analysts who said it was very risky. I looked closely at the bond documents, did some stories on that. And that paid off, unfortunately, when the company collapsed in 2012, because I had a base of knowledge, not only about the company and what they were doing, but also how the deal was structured, how the bonds were going to work, what would kick off where and cause what problems. And that kind of doing your homework is really valuable and helpful. And I think most reporters would agree with that the more time you can do your homework on a topic before it's the front page story or it's first thing on the 6 o'clock news, the better. But a lot of people just aren't given time. There's one of the biggest issues in media, I think, right now is you're asking fewer and fewer reporters to do more and more work on more and more topics. And you're never going to get as good of quality if people don't have time to learn their beats and learn their topics. So I think of 38 Studios, and I also think of pensions, which is super arcane, but obviously has been a huge news story in Rhode Island and has a lot of implications for the state's economy, for the fiscal health of the state, and for the cities and towns. And again, Channel 12 has sort of let me, you don't think of a TV station as leading, first at 6 we have pension data. We go with what the big exciting story is. But they've always thought there was value in me taking some time to learn, what all those numbers mean in the pension data and which numbers are which. And again, it came in handy a lot when it became the big story with Gina Raimondo's push that year, with the bankruptcy in Central Falls and other places, because I'd been able to develop, because they'd given me the time, that baseline knowledge. So those two come right to mind. I also think political coverage is huge for us at Channel 12. We're the only media organization that has done polling in every cycle for the last few cycles, and we still do. We do the big television debates in prime time that I now do with Tim White. And just the day-to-day coverage, trying to get, and I think especially for this, since this is a business station, people might appreciate, is I try to cover politics without losing sight of the policy side of it. It's really easy to get caught up in who's up, who's down, where are the polls, who's raising a lot of money, and I won't deny I write plenty of those stories. But I try to keep my head around, why do we care? We care because that person might become the governor or the mayor. And then what are they going to do if they get that job? What do they want to pass? Will their ideas work? Are they hashed out? Are they good ideas? So I try to keep a balance in there between the sort of sports side of politics, which is fun and interesting and people love it, and the reason we care at all, which is these people are going to have a big impact on our lives shortly if they win.
Yeah, I think the big bullet point in what you said, which I totally agree with, is there's a big difference between those quick hits, which are the day-to-day, and you're reacting to whatever the big story is or what you believe you should be putting out, and the well-thought-out and researched content. And I think that applies to not only individuals, but to businesses as a whole, as far as what content are you putting out that's of value, that's well-researched, and is going to have a shelf life, beyond that week. Because I think the BuzzFeed mentality is immediate. That's funny right now, or that's interesting right now, but then you forget about it in 10 minutes. They're just like little snack bites, as opposed to something you want to look at, more of a long form. And I think that's where you excel.
Yeah, and I think, well, thank you. I think there's also, something can go viral, but not do anything for your brand, I think, as a media organization, right? You can get a ton of hits because you have a crazy story, or, you got some big interview or something, but unless people somehow see that story or hear that interview and then say, oh, I really like this organization, I'm going to come back, it could be just a one and done. Maybe you sell some ads against it, but as a business, it doesn't pay off over the long term. But it's doing those things consistently and building up over time a loyalty. You mentioned Twitter. And one of the reasons, I actually saw a poll out today from Pew that said Twitter's actually, I think only like 16% of Americans use Twitter who are online. And it's like Pinterest is 21, Facebook's like 73%. But Twitter for me has been huge, both because, if you think about it, a writer inside a TV station, people aren't naturally expecting to go to Channel 12's website, or at least they weren't before we started with this, to look for written content, long-form content, right? They associate that with newspapers, with the Providence Journal, with New York Times and whatever. And Twitter was a way to sort of be able to broadcast my stuff out on a regular basis to people. That's just been huge for me for developing an audience that hopefully comes back, that sort of gets a sense of who I am and what my style is and where they can count on me to cover certain things. And I think that kind of loyalty and I hate using the word brand about yourself as an individual, but the brand value that comes out of people saying, "Oh, Ted Nesi, like he seems to do his homework on those numbers related stories, or he's really been all over this. I trust that he's going to come up with something interesting." That, I think, that has a huge value beyond just the day-to-day paid views, because I think it's a longer term. It's a relationship with people, and they'll come back to you. And especially right now when there is so much competition for different among different media outlets and for people's attention, I think the more you can do to make people want to come back to you, not just to grab them and with a salacious story or something, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's one way to get them. But if you can get them to sort of proactively say, "Oh, I like to check out what Ted's writing today," or Dan McGowan or whoever, I think there's just huge value in that you build up over time.
Exactly. And I think aside from the word brand, which is extremely popular now, what's your personal brand, what's your business brand, how are you known in the marketplace, and all of these things, it really goes back to reputation. I mean, it's a very old school way to look at it, but it's exactly what it is. What's Ted Nesi's reputation, and how can we trust what he's putting out? And kudos to Channel 12 for really having the foresight to put you in that position to be able to excel, because like you said, now you've expanded, you have Dan McGowan. And what's that working relationship like for you guys behind the scenes?
I think the thing you can't replace is people who just love doing it, who just can't help but want to know what's going on. It's kind of like still the town crier in a way. You want to know. We're gossips. We all want to know what's happening and explain it and tell it to people and find something interesting. And we just, we're curious, nosy people, and you can't fake that, right? That has to be inside you. And Dan is like me about that. He wants to know what the story is. But he cares a lot about getting it right, as all good journalists do, about trying to get past just he said, she said stories where, this councilman says crime is up, this one says it's down. Well, the reader, that doesn't help the reader a lot, because one of those people is wrong, and the reader does not have time to go to the police station and grab the crime reports and collate the data and figure out who's correct. That's where they need us as reporters, especially now when people are so busy. And Dan, like me, I think thinks an important part of our role is to, when we can, try to break down, no, this is a fact. Like, this is actually true. Dan has done this on the crime story. Crime is down in Providence this year. Certain types of crimes are up a bit, but overall crime is down. Now, people may say we still have too much crime, etc. That's fine. That's a policy debate. We can have that debate. But it's just not correct if people are going out and saying crime is up. Gina Raimondo had to apologize, actually, because she had said that, and it wasn't true, and Dan was the one who did the fact check. So Dan and I, in some ways, we're very independent. He covers Providence closely and education. He knows his beat. I wouldn't take it upon myself to assign him stories necessarily. I do sometimes encourage him towards certain topics because I want to read them, and I trust Dan's reporting. So I'm glad if I get to read a Dan McGowan story about something I didn't understand or was curious about. A lot of it involves, and I'd bring Tim White into this too, whose number one job is on the TV side but writes for the website too at Channel 12, is just talking amongst ourselves, bouncing ideas. Hey, I was thinking about this. Do you think that's a story? Or do you think I should ask this question? Or where would you go with this? Do you know how to get that? We're very collaborative, and I think that is a huge benefit for us as a group, and benefits Channel 12, that we see ourselves as a team where if Dan McGowan breaks a story, even if it's something I might have written as well, I'm glad because one of us broke it and it's on Channel 12's website, and I'm going to send people to his. We don't have internal rivalries, and those can be very toxic, I think, in any business, and very much including newsrooms, where if everyone's fighting over whose byline is on it, well, maybe you guys aren't talking to each other, so you miss a story altogether because you don't collaborate. We're very big on always talking to each other and keeping each other in the loop about what we're doing and seeing where the others can help. So it's a little, I'm not exactly his editor, but like I try to look at his stories before they go up. We talk to each other a lot. I have a little more experience, but not that much than him. So there's some of that, but I go to him too for, hey, I'm working on this thing. What do you think of this? How would this work? And it's great to have. It's been nice to have a second person doing something similar to my job, because I was on my own there the first 2.5 years. So it's been great to have another one with me.
AM 790, your station for talking business. This is Rhode Island's Future Begins With You. My name is Patrick Austin. We're interviewing political reporter and blogger for WPRI.com, Ted Nesi. And Ted's brought up some really great points about personal brand and reputation and how you can work, what your passion is in life into your job. And I mean, Ted's political reporting on WPRI.com has gotten him a huge following on Twitter. And I think a lot of the interesting things that he brings up are working together with Dan. I mean, just being collaborative in the spirit you have in your business and what you're doing online, and then also at the same time just living your job. I mean, this is an interest that you have, so like we said before, it's not a 9 to 5. You're waking up in the morning and seeing what's going on, not just reacting to it, but having a plan for exactly what your content is going to be that you put out. So how do you get your job done on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I'd say, actually, you say it's not a 9 to 5, and you're right about that. That's actually the part I think that I sometimes struggle with, or at least that can drive you crazy, because we are now in a period where it really feels 24/7. I know it feels 24/7 to readers and viewers, and it's even more so if you're working on it, right? Because news can break any time of day. We're all, it used to be in TV, you get things ready for the 6 o'clock news, for the 11 o'clock news, for the morning news, and you're out, and you wait till the next cycle you have time. Now, with the website, obviously it's 24/7. You want to have a story up as soon as that news breaks. And on the one hand, I think part of why my job has worked is because I've tried hard to be fast and to be quick and to compete for scoops and to compete to have the best story first. But that does come at a cost, after you can get just exhausted. I've certainly had times where I just felt it's kind of burned out. And I think everybody does who's working hard in media these days. And I think it is sometimes possible to lose sight of, again, that long-term value stuff we were talking about, where you're competing so hard to have more content up today, or that story 5 minutes faster, when maybe if you'd been second but taken a whole different angle, or don't worry about being first in the scoop, have the story that explains it so people really understand it tomorrow. I think all that's there, but for me, I think it is again just who I am. I'm always looking at my phone. I was interested in the news growing up, and I was interested in college, and so it wasn't a huge transition for me to suddenly it's my job to look at the news. Well, I was looking at the news anyway. It's just now sometimes I look at the news and have to do something about it, or I look at more Rhode Island news than I used to. But you try to live it, but you try to have sometimes you do turn off. I try on the weekends hard, not to have to write stories, not to, and then it's also, you also have your commitment to your organization, that if there's big political news on a Saturday, Channel 12 looks to me, looks to Dan, looks to Tim, to at least see what we can do about helping to make sure that's confirmed, getting it on the website, getting it ready for TV. So it's also as much for, if you carve out a beat, you also have a responsibility that people expect on that beat. And both in my organization and also, on Twitter, if there's big political news, if Governor Chafee announces he's not running and I'm just radio silent for a day, people are going to question the value of, I thought this guy was on top of it, but he's totally absent. So, but I think it's a struggle for everyone. I don't think anyone's totally figured out how to get a good work-life balance if you're in media in 2013, and I think that's something all of us will probably resolve to work on in 2014. Now,
you talk about your phone. I gave you a little pre-show interview sheet there. I'm curious to know, getting your job done now especially involves mobile apps and websites and doing all the research. So what apps are you using? How are you getting your job done? What's helping you out?
The two apps, I was thinking, it was funny, I had never really thought hard about this, Patrick, till you had me fill this out, but the two apps, and I use them together even though they're independent, that are vital to me are Tweetbot, which is a Twitter app for Mac and iPhones that is just really well done. Really, it's got a lot to it. A lot of different tools, ways to use it. It's very robust. And Instapaper. I'm such an evangelist of Instapaper. It's this fairly simple app where it lets you download the text of an article when you see it and save it for later on an account you have at the instapaper.com website. And the reason this is great is if, thinking about what we've been talking about here, all day long I'm on different websites, I'm reading things, I'm seeing tweets, and I'd say 2/3 of the time I see a story or hear about something I want to read about, and I just don't have the time at that moment, whether because I'm working on something else or I'm at work and it's not directly related to my work and it's not what I should be doing at that moment. And Instapaper sort of lets me put it all aside like in a clippings file and then look at it later on when I want to. And that's one of the best ways I have just to manage trying to read, because as I said, so much of my job just comes down to reading and learning as much as I can about a wide variety of topics, and trying to stay up on things. And so Instapaper and Tweetbot together are very, very crucial to how I do my job. And then Safari. I'm just always online.
Exactly. What are you looking forward to in 2014?
I think the elections are going to be interesting. A part of me dreads it because we have so many open races, so there's going to be a lot of competitive races to cover. And of course, I value that in some ways as a political reporter, but I also am aware of what it brings with it. It means more debates, it means more people to interview, more races to keep track of, etc. But I still think it's going to be very interesting to see, what vision people put forward, especially people running for governor, for where the state's moving ahead. Especially, one of the things I cover that seems pretty obvious, but that I get a lot of response for, is just the economy. I do a lot of stuff on, I mentioned earlier, like digging into the unemployment rates and stuff like that, partly because sometimes the headline is misleading. Like the unemployment rate in Rhode Island has fallen significantly in 2013. But when you look closely at the numbers, you see that it's largely because workers have left the labor force and given up. It's not as much because people are finding jobs. And that's at least concerning, right? If people are finding jobs, that's pretty much an unalloyed good thing. That's okay, people finding jobs, that's what you want. If people are leaving the labor force, and we don't know, are they Are they just going back to school? Okay, that's a good thing. Are they retiring early? Maybe a good thing, depending on how old they were. Or are they just giving up because they can't find any job that matches their skills? So I think 2014 I'm going to be watching again to see if there's much sign of significant improvement around. I've been surprised by how weak the state's economy has stayed the last couple of years. I thought even just like a dead cat bounce where it would pick up a little faster. We're next to Massachusetts and Connecticut. The national economy is finally picking up now. So you'd hope Rhode Island, particularly since not a lot of policy changes have been made, you'd hope we'd at least see some bounce back just from the mere fact of cycles. But it's been really bad. So 2014, I'll be watching for that. And also, we're gonna. I've mentioned earlier, I'm doing the show Executive Suite now, which is a business interview program, and we're getting really good guests on there. It's picking up steam. It's been on now a year and a half, and I'm enjoying that more and more. I think it's the better. It's Patrick, the better guests you get, the better your show is.
Exactly.
So maybe hopefully you get better ones than me coming up.
Oh, come on now. We're just about to wrap it up, but before we do, I always like to ask, what's your advice for somebody who's interested in a similar field to you? I'm sure there's a lot of kids in college, a lot of journalism students who are thinking, God, Ted's got that job that I want. And you just went out and you pitched yourself, and again, to Channel 12's credit, they saw the value in that, and now this is a position that exists nearly in every media outlet in Rhode Island. So what would your advice be to these kids? What should they be doing? How can they be looking forward to try to get a position like yours?
Well, first I'd say don't expect mine to work. I think there's a lot of luck and timing involved in my story. Sometimes I hesitate to tell the story about pitching the job at like a journalism class because I don't want to give a false hope that you should just go out and pitch jobs to all the people running major media outlets and they're all just waiting to give you decent jobs. But I'd actually go before that. And when I got out of college and decided I wanted to go into news, I applied for a bunch of jobs in Washington. I wanted to be big-time political reporter, and I just didn't get any of them. I just didn't. I was passed over, and that happens, obviously, to everybody in life. And I took a job at the Sun-Chronicle in Attleboro, my hometown paper in Massachusetts, a daily, and I covered Norton, and then I covered Mansfield, and I covered the Selectmen. And it's sort of a cliche, but I do think that there's no better training if you want to be a journalist than to start on a very local level. Because, first of all, frankly, you can fail, so you can mess up, and the stakes are somewhat lower because you're only affecting 20,000 people, not 300 million if you mess up about the president. But also, I think you are so close to your sources and to the community you're writing about, you realize how much your job matters. I'm a little removed at this point. I'm writing about a state of 1 million people, plus some of Massachusetts. You got 1.6 million people in this metropolitan area. I'm not going to talk to everyone involved. I'm not even going to see the vast majority of people who come across something I work on. But if you're covering a little town like Norton, Massachusetts, you're going to see a lot of people in the community. They're going to give you an earful, and they won't be shy about it if they don't like what you wrote. So I think it really helps you with the responsibility thing. It also just gets you good at your basic stuff. Did you ask all the questions? I remember I was doing a police shift on a Saturday night, and I kept turning in my little crime stories for the next day's paper. This person was arrested at CVS for pilfering this. This person got pulled over for DUI. And my editor finally came up to me and said, Ted, you're convicting everyone in these stories because you just say they did it. You don't say police say they did it. And I thought, oh, of course, right. I wasn't there. I didn't see him steal anything. I'm just saying the police told me, and so I'm just putting it. And things like that sound small, but it's good to learn them. And I think if you get too far ahead of your skis, you might not. So I think take that first job, take that job maybe you're not super excited about, and treat it like it's the job you were dreaming about having. I tried hard at the Sun Chronicle to think of story ideas just like I would if I was at a big time paper, to do ambitious things when I had the time. And again, I've always been lucky to have employers who supported me in doing stuff like that. So I think whatever job you have, treat it like you're at the New York Times if you're in journalism, and I think that will serve you well. And then accuracy matters a lot, and doing your homework matters a lot. So I think that kind of goes to the same thing. Do your homework, learn what you're writing about, and I think that'll take people far.